He was just a small-town realtor fighting to keep his father's land, a quiet patch of soil by the Willow Creek, where memories ran deeper than the roots of the old trees. Benjamin Parker had no idea that his stand against a powerful developer would uncover corruption reaching all the way to the county office. When his estranged son, an officer, returned home with their canine partner, a storm of truth, fire, and forgiveness began to unfold. What started as a fight for a piece of land became a battle for legacy, redemption, and family. Before we begin this journey, please take a moment to subscribe to our channel, leave a like, and tell us where you're watching from. Snow fell in slow, hushed spirals over Willow Bend, a mountain town that seemed to hold its breath between storms. The world outside was muted, the sound of the creek beneath the frozen bridge whispering beneath a thin crust of ice. In the midst of this stillness stood Benjamin Parker's farmhouse, a squat, weathered home of timber and stone that leaned slightly into the wind like an old man refusing to kneel. Benjamin Parker, 60 years old, realtor by trade, farmer by blood, was the kind of man whose every wrinkle told a story about stubbornness. He was tall and lean, with silver hair combed back neatly and a short-trimmed beard that gave him a look of quiet authority. His hands, though rough from repairing fences and fixing hinges, moved with the careful precision of a man used to signing contracts and measuring square footage. His eyes were the color of river ice, gray-blue, steady, but never cold. Once they had been filled with laughter. Now they carried the stillness of loss. It had been 3 winters since his wife, Helen, passed away. Since then, Ben had learned the art of silence. He made coffee strong, kept the radio low, and talked mostly to himself, or to the wind if it was kind enough to listen. His world had shrunk to the boundaries of his property, a few acres of pasture, a collapsing barn, and the willow trees that drooped over the creek like guardians of something sacred. He often said to himself that the land remembered people better than people remembered the land. It was both a comfort and a curse. That morning, he was standing by the kitchen window, staring out at the line where his property met the valley road. The snow was clean except for a row of tire tracks cutting across the lane, too deep, too fresh to belong to a neighbor. Ben frowned. The only people who drove out here in winter were either lost or unwelcome. He slipped on his old brown field jacket, the one Helen used to patch at the elbows, and stepped outside. A black SUV idled by the fence, its engine rumbling like a predator waiting to pounce. From it emerged a man in a charcoal overcoat, tall, broad-shouldered, with hair as dark as crow feathers slicked back against the snow. His name was Martin Cross, though the town knew him only from the headlines, a wealthy developer who bought up land the way men once collected trophies. His face was smooth, except for the thin line of a scar that traced his right jaw, the result, rumor said, of a construction accident years ago. But what truly marked him was his smile, polite, practiced, and utterly without warmth. "Mr. Parker," Cross greeted, extending a gloved-in hand that Ben did not take. "Beautiful piece of land you've got here. I imagine it must get lonely." Ben's voice came out steady, almost too calm. "It gets quiet. That's different." Cross chuckled, brushing snow from his coat. "Quiet can be valuable too. That's why my company, Cross Meridian, wants to invest in properties like yours. A sustainable eco-resort, low-impact construction, local jobs. You could retire comfortably, Mr. Parker. We're prepared to offer well above market value." Ben studied him for a long moment. "Land like this doesn't have a market value," he said. "It has memory. My grandfather built that barn. My father planted those trees. You can't price that." Cross tilted his head slightly, the smile never faltering. "Memories don't pay property tax. Be practical. Change is coming, whether you like it or not." Ben felt a flicker of heat in his chest. "Then let it come, just not across my fence." Cross's gaze sharpened for the briefest instant before softening again into corporate charm. "I'll give you time to think," he said, turning back toward his car. "But think fast. We wouldn't want this conversation to become complicated." The SUV drove off, leaving only the hiss of melting snow where its tires had been. Ben watched until the sound disappeared into the pines. For a moment, he thought of calling the sheriff, but Sheriff Dale had been in Cross's pocket since the quarry deal last year. No point. That night, the wind howled through the valley like something ancient waking up. Ben lit the wood stove, the fire painting the walls in gold and orange. He sat at his worn oak table with a cup of coffee gone cold and stared at the picture of Helen above the mantel. "They think this place can be bought," he murmured. "You'd laugh at that, wouldn't you?" Outside, the snow reflected the light from his window like the glow of a ship lost at sea. He didn't notice the faint shadows moving along the far fence, the flicker of flashlights, the dull thump of metal into earth. It wasn't until the next morning, when the wind had died, that he saw them, survey stakes, bright orange, driven deep into the frozen soil only a few yards from his barn. Each one bore the logo of Cross Meridian Development. Ben felt his heart sink into something darker than anger, something like betrayal. He grabbed a crowbar and pulled the first stake from the ground, the sound echoing through the still morning. By the fifth one, his breath came hard, his hands trembling with rage and exhaustion. "They don't listen," he muttered. "They never listen." He stood there for a long time, staring at the empty space where the stakes had been. A coyote howled somewhere up the ridge, and the sound filled him with an ache he couldn't name. He thought of Helen again, of her gentle insistence that he should forgive Daniel, their son. "He's stubborn, because you taught him to be," she used to say with a half-smile. Daniel Parker had left home 6 years ago, after one too many arguments about selling part of the land to pay the hospital bills. He'd gone into law enforcement, first in Cheyenne, then in Casper. The last time they spoke, it ended with slammed doors and silence that stretched into years. Ben often rehearsed apologies, in his head, but never managed to send them. Pride, perhaps, or fear of what time had already taken from them. Now, standing in the snow with his land marked like a wounded animal, Ben reached for his phone. His thumb hovered over Daniel's name, the same contact he'd never deleted. He imagined his son's voice, steady, clipped, all business. What would he even say? "Hi, it's Dad. I've got trespassers with survey stakes." The thought almost made him laugh, a bitter sound that caught in his throat. He pressed the call button anyway. It rang once, twice. Then Daniel's voicemail. "This is Officer Parker. Leave a message." Ben hesitated, staring into the distance where the creek curved out of sight beneath the willows. "Hey, son," he began softly. "It's been a while. I could use some advice about the land, about—" He stopped, exhaled. "Forget it. Hope you're well." He ended the call, pocketed the phone, and turned toward the barn. The door creaked open to reveal the smell of hay and oil, the faint sound of the creek bubbling through the broken boards. He paused, sensing something strange, a faint glimmer of red from outside the window, like a light blinking in the snow. He stepped closer, heart thudding, and saw it, a small red marker, freshly planted near the fence he'd just cleared. It wasn't there 5 minutes ago. Ben's breath caught. He looked around, the silence pressing tight against his ears. Somewhere beyond the trees an engine started. Then, just as suddenly, it stopped. The light blinked once more and went out. The storm began again, soft and soundless, covering the red marker in white until it vanished from sight. And Benjamin Parker, alone by the Willow Creek, finally felt the land hold its breath again. The storm rolled in like a living thing, snow thick as wool, winds that screamed against the valley. By midnight, Benjamin Parker's world had vanished into white. The windows trembled. The house creaked as if remembering other winters, other dangers. He sat by the fire, trying to read the old survey map his grandfather had drawn, lines of ink fading like memories. When the first sound came, a sharp metallic clink from outside, followed by the unmistakable crunch of boots on frozen ground. He froze, every nerve tightening. A second sound, glass shattering. The window above the sink exploded inward, sending a spray of ice and shards across the counter. Ben flinched, ducking instinctively. Through the storm's howl came the voices. 3 men, muffled but urgent. "Go around the back! Check the barn!" He grabbed the shotgun he kept by the door, not loaded for war, just warning, and stepped into the hall. His heart hammered against his ribs, the old instincts of a man who'd built his life protecting things no one else cared about. He peered through the crack of the front door and saw them. 3 figures in dark coats, faces hidden behind ski masks, flashlights cutting the night into shards of silver. One carried a gas can, another a crowbar. Ben's breath fogged in the cold air. "You picked the wrong night," he muttered under his breath, gripping the shotgun tighter. They moved quickly, purposeful, too professional to be random vandals. One man knelt near the barn door, fumbling with the latch. The smell hit Ben next, sharp, chemical, unmistakable. Gasoline. His pulse kicked. They were going to burn him out. And then headlights. A pair of bright white beams tore through the snow, cutting across the field like the eyes of some furious god. The truck engine roared as it skidded into the drive, brakes screaming. The intruders turned, blinded. One dropped the gas can, stumbling. The driver's door slammed open. "Police! Drop it, now!" The voice was steady, firm, unmistakable. Benjamin froze. He hadn't heard that voice in years. Out of the blizzard stepped Officer Daniel Parker, 35, tall, broad-shouldered, the shape of him more steel than flesh beneath the storm gear. His dark brown hair was cropped short, his jaw sharp with 3 days' exhaustion. His eyes, his mother's hazel eyes, burning with cold fire. He moved with the confident economy of a man who had been in worse situations and survived them all. Behind him leapt a streak of muscle and motion, a German shepherd with a black and tan coat, snow flying off his paws as he landed between the attackers. "Chief, hold!" Daniel commanded, and the dog froze mid-step, ears up, body taut with readiness. Then one of the masked men lunged toward the gas can. Chief reacted first. The shepherd exploded forward like lightning, no hesitation, no warning. He hit the man full force, jaws locking onto the padded sleeve of the coat, twisting him down into the snow. The man screamed, flailing. Daniel was there in 2 strides, kicking the can aside, wrenching the man's arm behind his back. The others ran for the tree line, swallowed by the storm. For a moment, everything was sound and motion. The wind, the barking, the pulse of fear. Then, silence. Daniel cuffed the man, pulling off the ski mask. The face beneath was rough, pale, unshaven, a hired hand, not a zealot. "Who sent you?" Daniel demanded. The man said nothing, just glared. But when Daniel searched him, he found something far more telling, a security badge clipped to the inside pocket, half covered in mud. The embossed letters caught the light. Cross Meridian Logistics Division. Benjamin stepped out into the storm, shotgun lowered but not forgotten. The 2 men locked eyes across the snow. For a heartbeat, neither spoke. Time seemed to stretch between them like the frozen creek, fragile, ready to break. Daniel was the first to speak. "Dad." Ben's throat tightened. The word hit harder than any storm. "You picked quite a night," he said finally, his tone dry but his voice unsteady. Daniel gave a small, humorless smile. "Dispatch said there was movement on your property. I thought it might be a false alarm. Guess I was wrong." They stood there, inches apart, the snow settling quietly on their coats. Years of anger, regret, and silence sat like an invisible wall between them. Then Chief trotted up, tail wagging, muzzle dusted white. He looked from father to son, as if trying to understand what separated them. Ben crouched slightly, extending a hand. "And who's this fine soldier?" Daniel's expression softened just a little. "This is Chief, K-9 unit, 6 years old. He's saved more people than I can count." Chief sniffed Ben's hand, then pressed his head against it, as if recognizing something kindred. Ben smiled faintly, rubbing behind the shepherd's ear. "Good boy, smart eyes. You keep this stubborn man out of trouble, huh?" Daniel chuckled under his breath, the first real laugh between them in a decade. For a brief moment, it felt almost normal. Inside, the arrested man sat slumped against the wall near the hearth, his mask tossed aside, the smell of gasoline faint but present. Ben poured 2 mugs of coffee, handed one to Daniel. "You still take it black?" he asked quietly. Daniel nodded. "You still burn it?" They both smiled, awkward but real. Daniel looked around the room, his eyes lingering on Helen's photo above the mantel. "She'd have hated to see it come to this," he murmured. Ben's hand tightened around the mug. "She hated watching us fight more." Silence stretched again, broken only by the sound of Chief's paws pacing near the door. Daniel finally reached into his coat and pulled out a notepad. "The badge links to a private contracting firm. They handle security for Cross Meridian. My guess? They were sent to scare you off before any formal acquisition." Ben frowned. "Cross himself came here yesterday, offered to buy me out. Said he'd make the land a sanctuary resort. I told him to leave. Guess he didn't take it well." Daniel's eyes darkened. "This isn't business anymore. It's intimidation. You need protection, Dad. Let me stay for a few days." Ben opened his mouth to protest but stopped. For once, pride felt like a luxury he couldn't afford. "All right," he said finally, "but if you're staying, you work. Firewood's low, and the barn door's hanging by one hinge." Daniel grinned faintly. "Still giving orders, huh?" "Still not good at following them?" Ben replied. It might have been a joke. It might have been forgiveness. Later, as the storm quieted to a soft whisper, Ben stepped outside with Chief beside him. The snow was deep, untouched, except for 3 sets of boot prints leading toward the woods, and another set, smaller, lighter, ending halfway down the path, as if the person had simply vanished. He frowned, scanning the trees. "You smell that, Chief?" The dog's ears perked up, his nose twitching. A low growl rumbled in his throat, not fear, but warning. Ben looked closer. Half buried beneath the snow near the fence was a plastic case, no bigger than a deck of cards, blinking faintly red before dying out. He picked it up, brushing away the frost. It had a label printed in fine letters, CM Geotech, Asset Tracker. He turned it over, confused, and then froze. It was still warm. Somewhere in the distance, a faint sound echoed through the trees, a car engine starting, headlights flashing once before disappearing down the ridge. Ben stood there, snow swirling around him, the tracker cold in his palm. Behind him, Chief let out a single sharp bark, eyes fixed on the darkness where the lights had gone. Something told Ben the storm hadn't truly passed. It had only changed shape. Morning arrived gray and heavy, the storm spent but the silence uneasy. The valley lay blanketed in white, untouched except for Chief's paw prints circling the fence line. The world seemed almost too still, as if holding its breath after what had happened. Inside the Parker farmhouse, Benjamin sat at the table with a half-empty cup of coffee gone cold. Across from him, Daniel cleaned his service pistol, movement steady, expression unreadable. The scent of wood smoke lingered in the air, mixing with something faintly chemical, the ghost of spilled gasoline still clinging to the boards. Chief paced near the door, tail low but alert, occasionally sniffing toward the window as if waiting for a command. The shepherd's coat glowed amber black in the light, and his torn ear twitched at every distant sound. Ben caught himself watching the animal's precision, the quiet intelligence behind those eyes. "He doesn't rest much, does he?" said. Daniel shook his head, a ghost of a smile playing at his lips. "He was trained for deployment, then reassigned for search and rescue after his handler got hurt. He doesn't know how to relax. Guess that makes 2 of us." Ben looked down at his hands, rough and scarred. "You didn't get that from your mother's side," he muttered. They might have said more, but Chief suddenly stiffened, nose pressed against the floorboards. He let out a low growl and pawed at the rug. Daniel crouched, peeling it back. There, half buried beneath a thin layer of dirt, was another small black device, identical to the tracker they'd found the night before. Ben felt the back of his neck prickle. Someone had planted these deliberately. "They're watching us," he said quietly. Daniel nodded. "Chief, track." The shepherd barked once and bounded outside. Daniel followed, rifle slung over his shoulder. The snow was deep but softening under the weak morning sun. Chief moved fast, nose low, weaving between the willows until he stopped beneath one of the larger trees near the creek. There, half hidden by a curtain of snow-heavy branches, was a tiny black camera, no bigger than a coin, mounted neatly against the trunk. A blinking green light pulsed every few seconds. Daniel snapped at the camera off and slipped it into a plastic bag. "Military grade," he murmured. "Not something a local contractor uses. Cross meridians playing dirtier than I thought." Ben crouched beside him, noticing a faint shimmer on the snow. "You smell that?" Daniel sniffed the air. A sweet synthetic scent lingered. Gasoline, but not the common kind. "Aromatic additives," he said grimly. "Imported blend. Whoever sent those men wasn't from around here." They followed Chief toward the road. Tire tracks led away but stopped abruptly where the snowplow had passed. Daniel knelt, brushing snow off a scrap of metal. It was a license plate, bent and caked with slush. But the numbers were wrong, slightly crooked, the edges too sharp. "Fake," Daniel said. "Classic diversion." Before Ben could answer, a familiar voice called out behind them. "Daniel Parker? I thought that was you." They turned. Standing a few yards away, camera slung around her neck, was Nora Bennett, a woman in her late 30s, with auburn hair tucked beneath a wool hat, freckles bright against her fair skin, and eyes the green of thawing moss. She wore a heavy brown coat and boots, dusted white from the hike. Despite the cold, her smile carried the warmth of recognition. "Nora," Daniel said, surprised. "Didn't think you still worked for the Willow Bend Chronicle." "Freelance now," she replied, brushing snow off her sleeves. "But I still can't resist when the words cross meridian show up in a police report. I heard about the break-in last night. Thought maybe you'd come home." Her gaze shifted to Ben, softening. "Mr. Parker, I'm sorry for what happened. My mom still talks about the time Helen helped her with the library fundraiser." Ben nodded politely, uncomfortable under the kindness. "Appreciate that. Hard to believe that was 20 years ago." Nora crouched to pet Chief, who accepted the attention with regal patience. "Well, you've got good company at least. Canines are heroes in fur coats." Chief wagged once, then resumed his vigil. Nora straightened and pulled a folded envelope from her coat. "I've been digging into Cross Meridian for months. On paper, they're clean, but they've got at least 3 shell corporations buying water rights across the county. They don't care about resorts. They want control of the underground aquifer, the one that feeds Willow Creek." Daniel frowned. "Water rights? For what? Bottling?" Nora shook her head. "Worse, they're pushing for mineral extraction permits under an environmental exemption. It's all buried in legal jargon. But I found this." She handed over a document stamped with Cross Meridian's subsidiary logo, Silverleaf Hydro-Geo Corp. "Their engineers filed a report last year claiming there's a geothermal vein running under your property, Mr. Parker. Warm water with high mineral content. The kind that could power or sell as therapeutic baths. That's what they're after." Ben's pulse quickened. "There's an old spring beneath the East Ridge. My father used to say the water eased his arthritis. Folks from town came here back in the 50s. I thought it dried up." "It didn't," Nora said quietly. "Cross Meridian wants it. And they're not waiting for your permission." They went back inside, spreading maps and papers across the kitchen table. Ben disappeared into the back room, returning with a dusty wooden box, a family heirloom carved by his father. He opened it carefully, revealing a bundle of folded maps, yellow with age. "My father worked for the Bureau of Land Management in 1952, Ben said. "He kept his own records. Said one day the land would need a voice again." Daniel examined the hand-drawn map. Faded ink traced the valley's creeks and wells, but one notation near the creek caught his eye. "Water Rights Clause 4B. If any private development alters the natural flow of Willow Creek, all prior land transfers are nullified." "That's it," Nora said, excitement flashing in her eyes. "That clause could kill their project, but you'll need proof the creek is tied to that geothermal source." Ben nodded slowly. "If that spring still runs, it's under the old well house by the ridge. I sealed it myself after Helen passed. Could be nothing but mud now." Before they could continue, Chief trotted over and nudged Ben's leg, tail wagging impatiently. Ben laughed for the first time in days. "What's gotten into you, boy?" Chief barked once, then jumped playfully against Ben's chest, his paws knocking a small brass key from the shelf above. It clattered onto the floor and spun to a stop. Ben blinked. "Well, I'll be damned. That's the key to the old safe in the pantry. Haven't opened that thing in decades." He fetched it, twisting the rusty lock until it gave way with a groan. Inside lay stacks of yellowed receipts, an old silver watch, and, tucked beneath, a crumbling ledger. Ben lifted it gently, flipping through faded pages. Then he stopped. There, dated 30 years ago, were several invoices stamped with Cross Meridian's original emblem. Unauthorized water transfer, Silverleaf Springs Project, 1994. Next to the signatures was one he recognized immediately. Martin Cross, then a junior executive. Ben's voice hardened. "They've been stealing water from this land for decades." Daniel scanned the page, jaw tightening. "And now they're coming back to finish what they started." Nora glanced toward the window, her expression troubled. "If they find out you have this, they won't stop at intimidation." Ben closed the safe, the old lock snapping shut like a verdict. "Then we don't hide," he said. "We prove them wrong." Chief barked sharply, as if in agreement, and the sound echoed against the walls like a promise. Outside, the wind shifted. The creek whispered beneath its ice, and for the first time, Ben thought he could hear something deeper. A faint hum from below the earth, warm and alive, like the breath of the spring itself waiting to return. And somewhere far down the road, a black SUV slowed beside a snowbank. Inside, Martin Cross watched through binoculars, the corners of his mouth curling into a smile that didn't reach his eyes. He reached for his phone. "They've found the map," he said. "Move to Phase 2. The day began with the smell of cinnamon and thawing earth. Snow melted off the eaves in slow silver drops, and the air carried that faint warmth of early spring, trying to remember itself. Inside the Parker farmhouse, laughter, real laughter, broke the long silence for the first time in years. It started when Chief committed what Daniel later called a tactical breakfast theft. The shepherd had slipped out through the half-open door, crossed the fence line, and returned 20 minutes later with a half-eaten apple pie dangling triumphantly from his jaws. The pastry had belonged to Mrs. Keller, the elderly widow who lived across the creek. She was a short, round woman with sharp blue eyes, a shock of white curls, and a tongue quick enough to scold any man under 60. She'd baked the pie for her church group, and now she stood on the porch, waving a wooden spoon like a weapon. "Benjamin Parker, that four-legged bandit of yours stole my pie again." Ben came out, half laughing, half apologetic. "Mrs. Keller, I swear he acts on his own reconnaissance." "Then he's smarter than you," she huffed, though the corner of her mouth betrayed a smile. "And tell your son I found this in the snow. Looks familiar?" She held up a single black leather glove. Daniel groaned, retrieving it. "Guess Chief believes in trade economy." Chief wagged his tail proudly, pie crumbs still on his muzzle. Ben chuckled, shaking his head. The moment was small, ridiculous, but it cracked something open in both men. For the first time since Helen's death, the house didn't feel haunted by her absence. It felt inhabited by life again. Later, while Chief dozed near the stove, Daniel and Ben sat at the table with mugs of coffee. The old maps lay spread before them, edges curling like tired memories. Daniel traced a finger along the inked lines of the creek. "You ever think about selling, before all this?" Ben's eyes went distant. "After your mother passed, I couldn't. Everything here smelled like her. The hay, the wood smoke, even the soil after rain. Selling it felt like burying her twice." Daniel nodded slowly. "I get that, but I needed to run towards something, anything. That's why I joined the force. Saving people made sense. Land didn't." Ben looked at his son, really looked, and saw the exhaustion under the stoic face. "Guess we both chased ghosts," he said quietly. "Yours screamed for help, mine whispered from the dirt." Daniel smiled faintly. "That's the most poetic thing you have said since I was 10. Ben smirked. "Don't get used to it." The warmth between them lingered like sunlight on snow, fragile, precious. As evening fell, the sky turned the color of bruised plum. The wind carried a sharp tang of smoke, faint at first, then stronger. Chief's head shot up, ears pricking. He barked once, short and urgent. Daniel was already on his feet, grabbing his coat. "The barn," he said, voice clipped. They ran out into the cold. The sight hit like a punch. Orange flames licking along the barn's side, smoke curling into the night. The old wooden door buckled, glowing from the heat. "Call 911, Daniel shouted, pulling off his jacket to shield his face. Ben didn't move. He was already running toward the structure, coughing against the smoke. Chief darted after him, barking frantically. Inside, the fire roared up the rafters, devouring the dry timber. Sparks hissed like angry ghosts. Ben reached for the water pump, but the hose was already melted through. He stumbled, blinded, and a beam above cracked with a splintering shriek. Chief lunged forward, teeth gripping the hem of Ben's coat, dragging with impossible strength. The beam crashed down a breath later, sending up a storm of embers. Ben fell backward into the snow, lungs burning, as Chief stood over him, growling at the flames. Daniel appeared with an extinguisher from the truck, sweeping arcs of white mist across the fire. His face was streaked with soot, eyes fierce with focus. "Dad, are you hurt?" "I'm fine," Ben wheezed. "Chief's the one who saved me." By the time the local volunteer fire crew arrived, the barn was half gone, but the rest of the property had been spared. Daniel walked the perimeter with his flashlight, jaw tight. Near the fence, half buried in slush, something metallic glinted. He crouched, lifting a silver lighter, engraved with the initials M.C. Martin Cross. Daniel's grip tightened. A few yards away, he noticed drag marks in the snow, signs of a struggle. Chief trotted over, nose working the ground, then barked once at a dark shape near the creek. A man lay there, unconscious, half covered in soot and ice. His black jacket bore no insignia, but a small waterproof USB drive dangled from a chain around his neck. Daniel checked the pulse, weak but steady. He's alive, probably one of Cross's enforcers. The lighter's his calling card. By morning, the man was gone. He'd vanished from the clinic before Daniel returned. No ID, no witnesses. Only the USB remained. Ben watched as Daniel set up his laptop at the kitchen table. Chief sat nearby, tail twitching with uneasy energy. The screen blinked to life, and a single folder opened automatically. Project Meridian Internal. Confidential. Inside, one video file. Daniel clicked play. The footage was grainy, filmed in a boardroom with glass walls and city lights behind them. At the head of the table sat Martin Cross, the same polished smile, now stripped of pretense. His voice was calm, deliberate. "Gentlemen, we move forward. The environmental reports are irrelevant. The resort narrative stays, healing retreats, thermal therapy, whatever sells. Our engineers will install the subsurface pump directly beneath the Parker property. No leaks, no trace. Once the water's redirected, we rebrand the area as a mineral spa. The locals won't know until it's too late." A man, off-screen, asked, "And if the landowner resists?" Cross smiled thinly. "Then we make resistance unsustainable." The video ended. For a long moment, only the crackle of the stove filled the room. Ben leaned back, eyes fixed on the frozen window. "He was never after my land. He was after what's under it." Daniel rubbed his temples. "This is criminal fraud, environmental tampering, corporate conspiracy, you name it. But we can't take this straight to court without verification. Chain of evidence matters. We'll need to find the original files." Nora arrived just as the first light crept over the ridge, her breath clouding in the cold. "I heard about the fire," she said, worry flashing in her green eyes. "Are you both all right?" "We're fine," Ben said, "but it's starting. They won't stop until we're gone." Nora's gaze fell on the USB drive. "What's on it?" Daniel played the clip again. When it ended, she looked pale but resolute. "That's enough to bury him, if we can trace the recording source. Cross's headquarters are in Denver. I've got contacts there. If you give me a day, I'll see what I can find." Ben hesitated. "It's dangerous." She smiled faintly. "So is breathing in this town lately." Chief gave a low bark, as if seconding her courage. As they watched her drive away into the gray morning, Daniel turned to his father. "We'll rebuild the barn, stronger this time." Ben nodded, placing a hand on Chief's head. "And we'll make sure they never touch this land again." From the hill above, hidden among the trees, two figures watched through binoculars. One of them, a tall man with a shaved head and scarred cheek, lowered the lenses. "They've got the file," he said into a radio. A voice crackled back, smooth and cold. "Then it's time to make them disappear." Morning came with a deceptive calm, the kind that made even danger seem like a bad dream. The snow around Willow Bend had begun to melt, revealing the muddy veins of the earth beneath. But in town, whispers traveled faster than the thaw. At the Willow Bend Cafe, a group of locals huddled around steaming mugs, voices low but sharp. "You hear about Parker? County inspectors say he's been dumping livestock waste into the creek," one man muttered. Another shook his head. "Always thought he was decent. Guess some folks don't care what they do to the land as long as they keep it." By noon, those whispers had turned into printed words. A notice nailed to Benjamin Parker's gate bore the seal of the County Environmental Division. "Violation of waste disposal, Code 22B. Immediate fine and investigation pending." The irony burned more than the cold. Ben stood there, paper trembling in his gloved hand. "They're painting me the villain," he said quietly. "They're making it look like I poisoned my own creek." Daniel tore the notice down and crumpled it. "This is Cross. He's using bureaucracy as a weapon." Inside the farmhouse, the phone rang nonstop. Reporters, local officials, even old neighbors calling to ask if the rumors were true. Ben ignored them all. His world had already shrunk to the smell of wet earth and smoke. Chief paced restlessly by the door, ears twitching. The shepherd sensed the tension thick in the air. His instincts, honed by years of training, told him danger wasn't gone. It was waiting. That afternoon, Daniel and Ben examined the small irrigation ditch behind the property where the supposed dumping had occurred. The water ran clear as glass. "They had to plant something," Daniel said, crouching. Chief sniffed along the bank, nose working furiously, tail stiff. Then he stopped, growling low. Daniel followed the direction of the dog's gaze. A strange chemical scent, sharp, artificial, hung in the air. "Solvents," Daniel muttered. "Not manure, not oil. Industrial." He grabbed a spade and began to dig. Chief joined in, clawing at the soft soil until the metal edge struck something solid. Together they unearthed a plastic garbage bag, sealed tight and slick with mud. Daniel slid it open carefully. Inside lay several small containers marked with hazardous waste symbols, each labeled with an unfamiliar corporate code, but stamped with a chillingly familiar logo. Cross Meridian Construction Materials Division. Ben exhaled shakily. They buried their own waste here and blamed me for it. Chief whined softly, as if understanding the cruelty of it. Daniel photographed everything. We'll send these to the state lab in Cheyenne. Chain of custody has to be perfect. By evening, Nora arrived out, her cheeks flushed from the cold and the urgency of the drive. She dropped her coat onto a chair, eyes blazing with anger. You were right. Cross paid off the county clerk's office, specifically a man named Harold Finch, the district secretary. I got a hold of his bank statement through a contact at the Chronicle. 2 deposits, both matching Cross Meridian's financial trail, 1 week before the bogus fine. Nora was relentless when she was angry, something Daniel had admired since they were teenagers. Her auburn hair was tangled by the wind, her green eyes fierce but tired. She'd been running on caffeine and adrenaline for days. This isn't just corruption, she said. They're rewriting the records, altering the official water rights database. Once that's done, your claim's erased. Ben rubbed his forehead. So, they take the land legally after making me look guilty. Clever. Daniel's voice hardened. Then we get ahead of them. I'm calling the Wyoming State Patrol Environmental Task Unit. They've got jurisdiction beyond the county, and they're not under Cross's thumb. He stepped outside to make the call. The wind had picked up again, scattering dead leaves over the snow. After a few minutes, he returned, phone still warm in his hand. They're sending an investigator, Captain Lyle Carver. Old school, tough, clean reputation. He'll be here by morning. Ben poured coffee for all 3 of them. Chief sat near the hearth, watching them like a sentinel. The farmhouse creaked in the wind, old wood sighing as if weary of holding up so many secrets. Funny, Ben said softly. When I was young, I thought the hardest fight was against weather and time. Turns out, men are worse storms. Night fell hard and fast. The power flickered twice, then steadied. Daniel checked the doors, the locks, and the perimeter before sitting down near Chief. If they come back, he murmured, we'll be ready. It happened just after midnight. Chief lifted his head first, ears flicking toward the barn. A faint hiss cut through the stillness, like air escaping a tire, steady and rising. The dog stood, muscles coiled, tail rigid. Then he barked sharply and bolted toward the door. Daniel followed instantly, instincts screaming. The hiss grew louder, now accompanied by a low metallic whine. When they reached the yard, the air carried a faint chemical bite. Propane. Gas, Daniel shouted. They're rigging something. He sprinted toward the barn, Chief beside him, the dog's nose leading him straight to the source. A metal canister, half hidden under hay, tubing snaking toward a spark trigger attached to a timer. A crude but deadly bomb. Ben stumbled out after them, flashlight trembling in his hand. Dear God. Daniel crouched low, analyzing the setup. Timer's short-circuited. They probably meant it to ignite when the pressure dropped. His voice stayed calm, but his eyes were hard as steel. Dad, back up. Get behind the truck. Now. Chief whined, then darted forward, teeth catching a frayed cord running from the valve. He yanked once, twice. The hiss sputtered. Daniel lunged in, twisted the knob shut, and ripped out the igniter wire. The timer stopped ticking. For a long second, no one breathed. Then Daniel slumped back, exhaling. It's safe. Ben's knees gave out, half from relief, half from fury. They tried to blow up my home. Daniel's jaw tightened. No, they tried to erase evidence. That canister's from an industrial site, probably stolen. When Carver gets here, we'll make sure it all goes on record. Nora appeared at the doorway, pale and shaking, her camera in hand. I heard it. Got photos of the setup before you disarmed it. She forced a grin. Guess I'm officially part of your family now. Chief barked once, tail wagging as if to agree. They brought the canister inside, setting it near the back door with the valve removed. Daniel labeled it for evidence, his handwriting steady, even as exhaustion crept in. Outside, the snow began again, soft, soundless, indifferent to human struggle. Ben looked out at the night, at the half-rebuilt barn still scarred black from the previous fire. You know, he said quietly, if this land really does have that warm spring beneath it, maybe it's not just the water that heals. Maybe it's the fight to keep it alive. Daniel placed a hand on his father's shoulder. Then we fight, until they run out of lies. Chief curled up near the door, finally closing his eyes, his breathing deep and even. He'd earned the rest, but his tail still twitched every few minutes, as if part of him refused to trust the peace. Far up the ridge, under the skeletal pines, headlights flashed once, then vanished. Someone had been watching again. and somewhere in an office lit by cold fluorescent light, Martin Cross signed a new order across a thick envelope stamped District Seal Authorization. "Leak or no leak," he told his assistant, "we move forward. By the time they prove anything, the papers will already be clean." The morning sun rose cold and deceptive over Willow Bend. Frost still clung to the grass, though the sky was a flawless blue, the kind that pretends nothing bad ever happened beneath it. But everyone in town knew what day it was. Flyers had gone up for weeks, glossy and smug. Grand groundbreaking ceremony, Meridian Springs Resort. The site, once the Parker family's pasture, had been fenced off and dressed with banners of blue and gold. A stage stood at the center, flanked by cameras and an oversized sign promising healing, prosperity, and progress. At the edge of the crowd, Ben Parker tightened his scarf and glanced at his son. "Maybe I should stay out of sight," he muttered. "I'm just giving them more reason to talk." Daniel adjusted his sheriff's badge, his expression calm but firm. "You can't, Dad. You're the landowner, and you're the truth behind their lie. Today, you walk with me." Chief padded between them, tail low but eyes alert. His collar camera blinked a faint green light, streaming directly to the State Patrol's secure channel. Up front, Martin Cross stood beneath a canopy of banners, perfectly composed. He was a man carved from ambition. Tall, broad-shouldered, mid-50s, dark hair combed with surgical precision. His smile could have been printed by a marketing firm. The deep lines around his mouth were earned not from laughter, but from years of calculation. Dressed in a charcoal coat and polished boots, he looked every bit the savior of the town he planned to hollow out. Behind him, Mayor Linda Carver, a plump woman with silver curls and nervous hands, fussed with her notes. Once known for her devotion to the town's library, she now avoided eye contact with everyone, especially Ben. She had been promised a seat on the board of the new healing resort. Cross raised a hand for silence. Cameras turned, microphones tilted forward. "Friends, neighbors, and future guests of Meridian Springs," he began, voice rich with false warmth. "Today marks a new chapter for Willow Bend, a place where healing waters will restore bodies and souls alike. This is not about profit. It's about legacy. It's about caring for our seniors, our veterans, our families." Applause rippled through the crowd, thin, uncertain. Nora Bennett stood near the back, camera slung over her shoulder, face pale from sleeplessness but eyes sharp as glass. She had spent the last night coordinating with the Wyoming State Patrol, transmitting files, authenticating every byte of the USB evidence. Captain Lyle Carver had promised to be here. As Cross continued, a large OLED screen flickered behind him, projecting slides of smiling retirees soaking in digital hot springs. His PR team, sleek and composed, nodded approvingly. Ben clenched his fists. "How can they buy this?" "Because it's easier to believe a lie that promises comfort," Daniel murmured. Then, mid-sentence, the screen stuttered. A sharp electronic buzz cut through Cross's words. The image glitched, flickered, and then froze. The crowd murmured. Suddenly, the polished graphics vanished, replaced by a grainy recording. Cross's own voice, unmistakable and cold, filled the air. "Our engineers will install the subsurface pump beneath the Parker property. Once the water's redirected, we rebrand the area as a mineral spa. The locals won't know until it's too late." The words echoed across the square like a gunshot. Cross froze, his hand still mid-gesture. Cameras whirred, capturing every frame. Gasps and whispers spread. The footage continued. Maps of underground pipelines, contracts, and finally, the forged county seal bearing Harold Finch's signature, the same documents Ben and Daniel had uncovered. Cross stepped forward, trying to salvage his tone. "That video is fabricated," he said, voice sharp. "A malicious deepfake intended to sabotage a legitimate project." But before he could finish, a convoy of dark SUVs rolled into the square. The crowd parted as uniformed officers from the Wyoming State Patrol Environmental Task Unit emerged, led by Captain Lyle Carver himself. Carver was a mountain of a man, in his early 60s, with weathered tan skin and eyes the color of steel. His short-cropped silver hair and deep lines across his brow spoke of a life spent outdoors, and a mind allergic to deceit. He had the calm authority of someone who had seen the worst of men and refused to bend. "Martin Cross," he said into the microphone, voice carrying effortlessly, "you are under investigation for environmental fraud, falsification of government seals, and criminal conspiracy." The crowd erupted, some shouting, some filming, some stunned into silence. Mayor Carver went pale, clutching her chest. "Lyle, wait, this can't be." "I'm afraid it is," he replied, not unkindly. "And if you were complicit, I suggest you get a lawyer." Meanwhile, chaos broke loose near the county tent. Harold Finch, the secretary, panicked. The small, balding man in a wrinkled brown suit shoved through the crowd, clutching a leather briefcase. Daniel spotted him first. "There!" Chief's ears perked. Daniel's command was sharp. "Chief, hold!" The shepherd bolted, weaving between startled legs. Finch sprinted toward his car, breath rasping, but Chief lunged just as he fumbled with his keys, knocking him down in the mud. The man shrieked, clutching his arm as the dog barked furiously, his body camera flashing red. "Hands where I can see them!" Daniel roared, sprinting up. He pinned Finch easily and retrieved a bundle of papers spilling from the briefcase. One caught his eye, a worn rubber stamp slick with ink. Across its face, official county seal. Ben arrived seconds later, breathless. "That's it, the seal they used to fake the water rights transfer." Nora's camera clicked furiously, capturing the moment. "Got it," she said. "Every frame." Captain Carver approached, expression grim but satisfied. He examined the seal, then nodded to his team. "Confiscate all records. This is the smoking gun." Cross, seeing the inevitable, tried to retreat behind his aides, but the cameras boxed him in. "You can't prove that recording wasn't edited," he barked. "You think the people care about a little paperwork when I'm offering them jobs?" Ben stepped forward, voice rough but steady. "You offered them poison dressed as hope." His gaze was unwavering. "This land has healed people for generations. You tried to bury it under lies." Cross sneered, but for the first time his mask cracked. "You can't stop progress, old man." Daniel's eyes were ice. "Maybe not, but we can stop you." Captain Carver motioned for his officers. "Take him." As Cross was led away, his polished shoes sinking in the muddy thaw, the crowd's silence broke into a storm of murmurs and disbelief. Chief sat beside Ben, tail sweeping the ground once, as if punctuating the end of a long, bitter chapter. Above them, the LED screen flickered again, now showing a different image, the natural spring beneath Willow Bend, recorded decades ago. Elderly townsfolk bathed their aching joints in its warm flow, smiling through the steam. The caption beneath read, "For the people, not for profit." Ben exhaled shakily. "Your mother would have liked that ending," he whispered. Daniel smiled faintly. "It's not the ending, Dad. It's just the part where we start to rebuild." Chief gave a low, contented woof, as if agreeing. The wind shifted, scattering the banners of Meridian Springs across the trampled field. For the first time in years, Willow Bend felt alive, not because of what had been built, but because of what had been saved. The trial came faster than anyone expected. News outlets from Denver to Cheyenne covered the story. Real estate tycoon charged with water rights fraud. Martin Cross, once the shining symbol of rural revitalization, now appeared before the county court in an orange jumpsuit, his perfect hair unkempt, the arrogance replaced by a brittle exhaustion. He faced charges of environmental fraud, forgery, arson, and conspiracy to falsify government documents. His empire of false promises was crumbling, one forged signature at a time. Captain Lyle Carver testified first, steady and clear. His words carried the unshakable weight of a man who'd spent a lifetime standing against storms. This wasn't just corruption, he told the court. It was theft of the earth, the air, and the dignity of an entire town. Harold Finch, trembling and pale, took the stand next. The once proud county secretary confessed everything. How Cross's people had paid him to alter records, how he'd falsified seals late at night in exchange for hush money. His voice cracked as he said, "He told me no one would ever check the files." Nora Bennett's reporting spread across state lines. Her articles, filled with photos, interviews, and evidence, became the backbone of the prosecution. For the first time, Willow Bend wasn't a forgotten dot on the map. It was a lesson in resilience. When the verdict came, the town gathered outside the courthouse. The sky hung heavy with spring clouds, the kind that carried both rain and renewal. The judge's words rang through the speakers, guilty on all counts. A cheer erupted, not of vengeance, but of relief. Weeks later, the Parker property was declared a community mineral reserve, protected by state order. The warm spring that had once been the center of greed was now the heart of hope. On a mild April morning, sunlight danced across the creek. The barn had been rebuilt, stronger, brighter, and a new sign hung at its entrance: Willow Bend Canine and Wellness Center. Inside, laughter mingled with birdsong. Elderly residents practiced gentle stretches, guided by Martha Lee, the ever-cheerful cafe owner, who now volunteered as a community coordinator. Her pink sweater was dusted with flour, her cheeks perpetually rosy. "Easy there, Mrs. Keller," she said, helping the plump widow balance along the handrail by the warm pool. "One foot at a time, pretend you're walking toward the dessert table." Mrs. Keller chuckled, her silver curls trembling. "You always know how to bribe me, Martha." Nearby, Chief trotted proudly, his black and tan coat gleaming in the sun. A small badge glinted on his collar, engraved Community Guardian. He paused beside a nervous newcomer, Mr. Lowell, a thin retired carpenter, with trembling hands and the haunted eyes of a man who'd lived too long alone. Chief sat beside him, nudged his knee, and wagged his tail. Slowly, Mr. Lowell reached down and smiled for the first time in years. Ben watched from the porch, leaning against the railing. His face had aged more in gratitude than fatigue, lines softening into something like peace. Daniel approached from the truck, still in his sheriff's jacket, but lighter somehow, freer. "You're getting good at this community stuff," he said with a grin. "I just follow Chief's lead," Ben replied. They stood in companionable silence, the sound of laughter and running water wrapping around them like a hymn. Finally, Ben spoke. "You know, I kept this land because I was afraid. Afraid if I let go, I'd lose your mother all over again. I built fences because it hurt less than remembering." Daniel nodded, his eyes distant. "And I ran from home because saving strangers was easier than facing the one person I couldn't save." He exhaled. "I'm sorry, Dad, for all the walls my badge built between us." Ben's hand rested on his son's shoulder. "And I'm sorry for the walls I mistook for shelter." The creek murmured beside them, the sound deep and steady. In its reflection, the two men stood side by side, father and son, their shadows joined beneath the moving water. That afternoon, the town held a ceremony in the small park by the spring. Nora stood at the podium, hair brushed by the wind, her green eyes shining with pride. "This town has weathered more than storms," she said. "It's weathered greed, loss, and silence, and yet it stands, thanks to those who refuse to look away." Captain Carver stepped forward next, carrying a polished wooden box. Inside lay a silver medallion engraved with the words, "Community Guardian." "There are heroes who wear badges," he said, his voice deep and rough, "and there are those who earn them by heart." He knelt, clipping the medallion onto Chief's collar. The shepherd blinked, tail wagging as the crowd erupted in applause. Children clapped, elders wept quietly, and the sound rolled across the valley like thunder wrapped in sunlight. Chief tilted his head, as if unsure why everyone was cheering, then barked once, short, sharp, joyous. Ben laughed through tears. "Guess that's his acceptance speech." Daniel grinned. "Shortest one in history." Later, as dusk settled, the park emptied except for the Parkers and Nora. Fireflies blinked above the reeds. "You did good," she said softly. Ben smiled. "No, we did good." Chief lay beside the creek, head resting on his paws. The water glowed faintly under the setting sun, carrying the warmth of the spring across the stones. It murmured, ancient and forgiving, as if whispering the stories of everyone who had stood there before. When the first real spring rain began to fall, the elders laughed instead of hurrying for shelter. Martha handed out towels, Mrs. Keller declared it good for the joints, and Chief pranced through puddles like a pup. Ben watched it all and felt something lift inside him. Not victory, not pride, something gentler. Belonging. He turned to Daniel. "You know," he said quietly, "this place always had healing water. We just needed to remember who it was meant to heal." Daniel smiled, following his father's gaze to the people, the land, and the dog that had bound them all. "Home," he said simply. Chief barked again, tail swaying as if to agree, and beneath the rippling surface of the spring, the water caught their reflections. Father, son, and guardian dog, three souls stitched together by memory, loss, and love. The water remembered them all. As the sun set over Willow Bend, Ben, Daniel, and Chief stood by the healing creek, its waters shimmering like liquid gold. What once was a battleground of greed had become a sanctuary of grace. Some in town called it luck, Others called it perseverance. But Ben, with his hand resting on Chief's fur, whispered softly, "No, it was a miracle. One only God could weave through the cracks of our stubborn hearts." Because sometimes God doesn't send angels with wings. He sends a faithful dog, a son returning home, a moment of courage when all seems lost. And through those small, quiet miracles, He reminds us love and truth will always find their way back, even through fire. If this story touched your heart, take a moment to share it with someone who still believes in second chances. Leave a comment to tell us how faith, love, or a loyal friend once changed your life. And if you believe that God still works His miracles in ordinary homes like ours, subscribe, share, and may the Lord bless you and your family with peace, courage, and a faithful companion by your side.